So we were just notified that it looks like we're going to be evicted from our home. But in order to get into that story, I guess I need to tell you a little bit of backstory. I guess it was about 20 years ago. I bought an old house for like $30,000 to $36,000. I mean, it was cheap. And it was, well, I don't know. It was an old house that had started out as a one-room house, and then it expanded and expanded. And eventually you had all these sections of the house. It had a bedroom, and then it had a living room, but it also had like another living room that we just made into another bedroom. And then another section was the kitchen, another section was the bathroom. But it was all kind of just pushed together. I remember one time I went up underneath the house and it was just a little crawl space. And the main beam that held the house was an old oak tree. So it was a 100-year-old house when we moved into it. So the insulation in it was terrible, but we got it pretty cheap. The first year we were there, it had a propane floorboard heater in the dining room. My wife and I was not a big fan of propane back then. We'd known someone who was actually my landlord. And I've told this story before. You can actually Google it. But in Iowa, there was a guy who was digging out something so he could build a doghouse. And he hit his propane line and didn't realize it. So all that propane went down into the basement of his house, and all the smell had filtered out because it was underground. And that smell is an additive they put into it. Well, on Labor Day or Memorial Day, whatever day, one of those holidays, he lit up his barbecue pit and it just blew the house up. I mean, there was nothing left. So when we got there, it had this 1,000-gallon tank and it was huge. Well, two things was against its favor staying. One, we didn't like propane, and two, it would have cost a fortune to fill it up. And of course, we didn't have a lot of money. We just bought the house and down payment and all that. We got there in April, and we turned the little floorboard heater on. While it was on, it ran out of gas, so there was nothing left. So that next winter, we'd have been scraping money together to fill it. Well, ended up, we sold it, the tank, and we put in baseboard heaters, electric heaters. And we thought we could get through the winter with those. Not even close. I mean, it had those old windows, the house did, those wooden windows, and had no insulation in the walls. Well, I remember that winter, I decided, that's it. I'm not dealing with this much longer. So my wife, ex-wife now, but my wife at the time was at work at the post office. She worked at the post office on Saturdays, and I ripped out a window. That meant we had to go to Home Depot and buy a window. And then I just started replacing all the windows in the house. And then I think that summer, we bought that blow-in insulation and we filled up all the walls and got the ceiling insulated. But it was a rough winter. We ended up having to sleep in the living room. We ended up buying a kerosene heater on top of that. Remember, this was a hodgepodge house. It was all put together, so any heat that was in the living room would not have made it into the kitchen. So we had to have this kerosene heater in the kitchen to keep the plumbing from freezing. And it didn't matter. I mean, it always froze anyways, but we had to do our best. We didn't want the pipes to break. Now, I know people will say, lift the faucet up and let it drip. But our water bill was so high that we really tried to keep from doing that. Although we had to buy the kerosene to keep everything warm, it was a miserable winter. Right in the middle of the winter, we had this huge blizzard. I don't think it was actually classified as a blizzard, but the snow drifts were probably 4 feet high. It was terrible. And it knocked out the power. So our electric floorboard heaters wasn't even on. So we had to keep the kitchen from freezing. Now, I do not remember why we decided that we weren't going to let the water drip, other than it was just so expensive. We all had to move into the kitchen. You know, people say you got to huddle into one room of your house in those kind of situations. Well, you always kind of think it's going to be the living room. And don't get me wrong, we started out there. I had this little generator, and I turned it on so we could run this little space heater, 1,000 watts, 1,500 watts, something like that. And it just would not heat that living room. It just wouldn't. So then I started moving the kerosene heater from the kitchen into the living room and back and forth. Well, that was useless. I mean, as soon as you took the kerosene heater back into the kitchen, it was cold. Well, we had no choice. We had to sleep in the kitchen, and that kept the bathroom and all the plumbing from freezing. I think in hindsight, you know, I was young and stupid, but in hindsight, it would have been cheaper and easier to let the water drip so it wouldn't freeze. There's something you have to think about. Now, if you got a well, I always thought about this. If you got a well, you have no choice but to keep those pipes from freezing because you don't have any electric to let the pump run. So you'd have to open it up, and those pipes would still freeze. They may not break because you've opened up all the faucets, but it would take a while for them to thaw out, I would think. Just things you got to think about that I don't think preppers talk about. But I tell you, that first year was miserable. Well, the second year wasn't so bad. And then we ended up spending, I don't know, $2,500 or something for an electric furnace. And that really helped things out. The only problem was right before we moved out of the house, we had a problem with the furnace. So we hired a guy to come in and take a look at it. It was a simple solution. But he says, you know, I don't know if you know this, but your furnace has 2 heater banks. And one of them has been disconnected. Well, the only person that would have connected it was the guy who installed it. So he never connected the second one. So that last winter we were there, we actually got a decent amount of heat out of our furnace and the house. It heated up real quick, and our electric bill actually went down a little bit that year. I guess because it was running more efficiently with both heater banks on. But we were paying, way back then, $300 to $400 a month to heat the house. It was crazy high. And I've always thought, no, I'm never going to do that again. So our future has changed quite a bit. I have found that gas heat is much more efficient than electric, and propane heat is even more efficient than anything. And you can Google that because people will argue with me, no, natural gas is more efficient. You get more BTUs per unit of measure from propane than you do natural gas. We might have been better off keeping that propane tank, but again, hindsight being 20/20. So then we moved out of that house, moved in some apartments. Okay, just so you know, this cat comes out to see what I'm doing in the woods. She'll expect me to come home. She comes out here, she hears me, she doesn't like me out here by myself. She wants to keep me company. So she's gonna want me to come home. That's the second time she's come out to the woods to find me. So then we rented a house, and it had propane, and we were never home, so I was able to turn the heat way down on that place. And we made it through the winter. It wasn't insulated at all. I did put some insulation in the ceiling over the, well, it's hard to explain. I'm not going to try to explain it, but I did put some insulation in that rental property just to keep the heat in the house a little bit better. But with me turning it down, it wasn't too bad that year. And then we went on the road. Now we're here, we have the wood stove. And I'll tell you, having this little tiny house, there's been nothing better. It takes nothing to heat that house. The other day I had to go buy some firewood, so I went to the Dollar General and picked up some toothpicks, and I brought them home, set them next to the wood stove. Carolyn says, "What you doing with those?" I said, "Well, I needed some firewood." And that's kind of how much firewood it takes. It doesn't take much. Maybe using a quarter of a log. I mean, it's not much. It burns, and then it lasts all day, especially in the fall like this. Then I get up in the morning and do it again. So we're three little sticks. I wish I had an example. And this is the way to go. I know a lot of people seem to think that you got to have a big house, but in today's economy, it's just not possible. Well, today, we've got some horrific news. The heating costs are going to go up dramatically. So people are being evicted from their home. I said that in the title. And it's true. You're going to have to do what we did back in the early 2000s. It's my understanding that electric heat is going to go up 10%. Heating oil, that's going to go up 27%. And I think natural gas, it's up 10, 15, 20%, something like that too. Propane's going up 5%. So costs are going to go up. Now, when you think about this, this also means that you're going to have to cut down on your food costs. So you either cut down on your heat or you cut down on your food. Well, you need both to survive. Now, I've said this before, that I think having heat is more important than having an air conditioner. Last summer, I proved that we could live without an air conditioner. Those that live in Florida are going to argue, no, you can't, but I understand there's exceptions. But in general, it's more important to have heat. You can't do anything without heat. All your food's gonna freeze, your water's gonna freeze, you're gonna freeze. Whereas in the summertime, you still have the things you need. You can still get your water, you can still get your food. You're going to have to start thinking about how you're going to reduce your heating costs, because you won't be able to afford food if you try to pay for the heat the way you think you can. I mean, over the summer, people ran their air conditioners and people were getting their electric shut off. We need to expect this is what's going to happen. I just got a message today that this is going to be the coldest winter in, I don't know, a couple decades, whatever it said. So we're going to have a cold winter and it's going to be really expensive to heat. So you're going to have to expect that your costs are going to go up. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to move out of your bedroom, your living room, your dining room. And you're going to have to figure out a way to kind of live in your kitchen. And I say the kitchen because I think that's the most important place to be. That's where all your food is, your spaghetti sauces and all that. That's going to freeze if you try to shut off your kitchen. Your water faucet. If you're trying to drip water the entire winter to keep your faucet from freezing, you're going to run up your cost on the water. So everything you're saving in electric, you're spending in water. Well, maybe not everything. Well, maybe close. I know it would be more convenient to sleep in the living room, but you got to think about the big picture and how you're going to manage this. I think it's already too late to buy firewood. It's not going to be seasoned. You're going to need a firewood that's going to be seasoned at least 6 months, depending on what you get. If you get some of those softer woods, you can go 6 months, but if you get oak or hickory, it's going to be a year or two before that'll be seasoned. The other option is a pellet stove, but those are pretty expensive, but it might be worth it. Now, of course, you can go online to Facebook Marketplace or something like that and find them relatively inexpensive. I'm hearing people say all kinds of crazy things like, go get yourself a buddy heater. Well, what good is a buddy heater going to do you? You still have to buy the propane, and if you don't buy the adapter so you can use it off a 20-pound tank, you're buying those little 1-pound cylinders, and those are really expensive because the cylinder cost. Yes, we're all going to be evicted from our homes, and I think the best solution is to get off grid. Don't rely on people to take care of you, because this is what happens. We've known this is going to happen. The government came out today and said that the prices are going to go up. There's no reason not to believe them. They got an election coming up. Why would they advertise bad news unless there's actually some bad news? So if you click this up next box, it'll take you to a video where I'm talking about firewood. So I hope I can inspire you to consider living off grid so you can live your dreams. Thanks for watching.